I'll give it to you.
I think it's on.
Okay, deal. And the floor is open to questions. Just say something intelligent. Well done.
So we did this last night at a reading too, and I felt like we were on Jerry Springer. Are there questions, thoughts, comments, complaints? Like they say at the post office. Think he's dead. Yeah.
Somebody think of something very clever.
Observations.
So they haven't traveled such far away to just find out that Racine is a bunch of lamos.
Well, the first photo read, I don't remember the name. Say your first name again.
Hi, I'm Tracy.
Hi, Tracy.
Oh, that's why it's
See? I told you! You claimed it was
My name is Tracy.
I come to a lot of these, you know, I've been to lots. I've participated in a few, and this was the first time I was really emotionally moved on 3 separate occasions during one meeting. And God, it was so powerful. This was, yeah. You would be moved by your own words, and that is so moving to an audience. You were just doing it, you were feeling it, and we were feeling it too, and I want to thank you for that. Question.
There's no question on there.
Question is, how do you get so good?
She was born that
I
way.
have a lot of feelings. I don't know, I guess the one thing I would say about like emotional power in poetry is just that's what I go to poetry to read. I like to be delighted and entertained and treated to something spiritual and something dark and something whatever. But whenever I go to an art museum, I move towards the first piece that terrifies me. Because usually you can't see everything in an art museum anyway, and I'd rather spend 20 minutes in front of something that I'm afraid of than something that makes me feel nothing. So I think that I kind of do that when I write too, is I go towards what am I afraid of, what's risky, where's the vulnerability, where's the urgency. But I'm actually quite delightful in real life. I make jokes, I'm fun. But sometimes people who know me as a person don't expect the book, or somebody knows the book and they don't expect the person. And it really, I promise.
Well, we know the quote from while you're undressing now, so.
Oh, it's good. It's very seductive. I don't know. Things transform. I'm transforming. I don't know. Read it if you have
Are there any
it.
other
Look at
questions?
that. Look what's happening.
Oh my God. You plant a seed.
How many years have each one of you been publicly performing?
Somebody else who knows. Hold on.
I want to know how long you've been privately.
Only at birthday parties. Let's see. I was living in a house in Virginia and left the man, the dog, the house, and the state in 2004 to go to New York City and be a poet, goddammit, because living a real life sucked. So I would say 2004 for me. That's not very public, but that's when I left my life.
I think it was about 1998 or so when I was in graduate school that I first started to give readings. And I have always found them difficult to do. So practice, yeah.
I would say about 10 years ago. Yeah, 15 minutes ago. Yeah, about 10 years ago, and that went on for about 4 years, and then there was like 4 years where I did nothing, and the last few years I've been actively pursuing it again. So.
There's a question in the back.
Oh, how do you choose what to perform?
All of them. All 4 sentences.
Well, for this, I just took the songs that aren't being used in the other 2 projects. So that was pretty easy. Like I said, it was also very difficult because these songs don't get played. So that's that.
Well, I try to think about what the audience might like to hear, and I also pick work that I'm excited about, which is why I read some newer stuff tonight. And I try not to repeat too much. Try to vary it.
My book just came out like 6 months ago, so I haven't done that many readings yet. So I kind of have a standard set list, because at first I was just standing really close to the microphone, looking down, and I don't vary it because somebody said that I should look at the audience, and I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I feel like I need to be vulnerable up there, and if I can't look, and they said, well, what's more vulnerable than looking at the audience? And I was like, well, shit. Okay, I'm looking at people, which means I need to know the poems I'm reading. And I also feel like there are ones that I know are sort of like the hit singles of the album. Like, I know that people want to hear certain poems, or if they don't know they want to they end because they're just ones that read better out loud, and they're pieces that I don't think read really great for an audience. You have to spend a little bit more time with them or think about them, or there's something that the page provides that I can't give with myself and my voice. So, yeah.
Tracy, I think one of your poems was titled, or was somehow a prayer, or had prayer in the title.
Mm-hmm.
And then Anne had one that was like an anti-prayer, right? And I can't remember the title of that, but in a way, it was sort of, so I wonder what place prayer has in your poetics. You're thinking about speech or language, or how would happen if we have those two different kinds of prayers?
I would
It's a
say
dope question, really. That's a good.
people were commenting on the similarities in our work last night, and we're like, yeah, we like some of the same things. But that's interesting, because I think one of the goals of my poems is people talk about audience, who do you write for, who do you imagine, and I almost never imagine someone specific except for when I'm writing a prayer. Like, most often I'm thinking of, Lord, please knock it off. Like, I'm trying to live life here, or I'm thinking about someone specific that I'm like, if I could possibly heal you with the language that I'm writing in secret that I'll never show you, then that's about the only time I'm thinking about someone or something specific is when I write a prayer. Other times, the audience is a vaguer notion to me. I don't imagine all of your faces, but maybe next time, yes, when I write a poem.
I love that question. That's a great question. My favorite definition of poem, and I can't remember whose definition this is, but someone said poetry is a sacred language within the language. And I think that poetry and prayer have actually a lot in common in terms of being like a special kind of language that's meant to accomplish something that ordinary language can't. And I actually, even though I don't necessarily pray a lot, I think about prayer a lot as a kind of language that's constructed to try to accomplish, or try to bring something about, right? In the same way that a poem tries to bring something about. And in that poem in particular, The Obsolescence of Prayer, the idea is that there's prayer, but is there an ear listening? And if there is an ear listening, is there something to respond? So in a way, it's similar to poetry, where you're writing the poem and you don't know if it's going to find an audience, and you don't know if it does, how the audience is going to respond to that. So I think actually for me there are a lot of similarities between the two, even though I hadn't really thought about it that way. But it's a question of like, what is the power of that utterance? Do you want to go for it? Yeah.
Sometimes when I write a poem, I'm trying to communicate something in that sacred language that you speak of. Other times, that seems like I'm leaving breadcrumbs, leaving clues, and inviting people to interpret on their own. I wonder if you could comment which one of those you lean towards.
Prayers made of breadcrumbs? I think I'm like Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah, I think I'm actually like annoyingly clear when I write. I feel like I'm really putting it out there exactly what I'm trying to say, and I'm being specific. And then I've seen like things that are posted online, or there's a discussion board about a poem I've written, and people talk about it, and I'm like, they have no clue at all. And I thought I was being so clear. So I think, like, despite as clear as you think you're being, that's like, you know, every time a prayer isn't answered, maybe it just wasn't understood the way you like being so clear. Or like any argument you have with a spouse, you're so clear about how that argument went down, and they remember a totally different version of that argument. Or just like any communication, like, as hard as you can try to be clear, it isn't clear on the other side. But I'm totally happy to have anybody interpret that scattering of breadcrumbs as a trail, as a dinner, as a whatever they want to see it as. That's great for me, because Umberto Eco has this essay about how every reader finishes the piece. And I totally believe that. I think that a reader is bringing their own past reading, past experiences, their life, their hurts, their dreams, their weaknesses, their everything to whatever I have strung together in a line. And they're going to take away whatever they need or want to take away, and I'm totally happy with that, because I got what I needed in line from the poem. So.
And yeah, if I can just add to that, I always think of buoys in the water, and then being connected by a line that runs under the water. And so, you know, they come up at certain points, and then there are points of connection underneath that you can't see that are available for interpretation by the reader. And yeah, the reader is the one who can connect the dots in a certain way or in a different way. And that's great. I think that's one of the things about poetry that makes it really cool.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Take two more.
Do you find yourself revising older poems? Do you keep revising them, or do you write them and let them go?
Or songs.
It's a good question. We were talking about this last night, actually. I tend to work on a piece really hard for, you know, pretty intensely, and then leave it alone. And then I make, after some time has elapsed, like it gets time to age, then I go back, and then I kind of see what it needs. And I can only see, like, only after a certain amount of time has elapsed, and it varies, can I see what it actually needs in order to get fixed. And then it tends to be pretty much done, so I don't tend to revise older stuff a lot. But at the same time, I have a lot of older stuff that never quite got finished that I still will get out and work on periodically. And some of that eventually comes to fruition. But I think Tracy's process is different.
I think it just depends on the poem, or maybe more the obsession. Like, sometimes the poem, you're like, okay, well, I can clearly see this needs work, or I don't feel done with this. But other times, something just calls you back and calls you back and calls you back. And I mean, even if you think it's done, you're like, why am I still obsessed, or why does this still keep coming up? And so sometimes the poem just, by virtue of not leaving you alone, will let you know that would still like to be worked on, or it would like to see itself in another manifestation. Because I think a lot of revisions are just become new poems. Like, it's not even what you said to begin with. But I also heard that Ernest Hemingway would take a first draft and he would turn it over and just trust that anything that he wrote that was brilliant would end up in the second draft, but there was no reason in looking at that. So sometimes when I'm frustrated in revision, I'm just like, well, I clearly have carved the heart out of this poem. Everyone's good intentions and good advice have just made this a completely lifeless turd of a poem. And so I just need to, like, put it away, and whatever it is that I was trying to say, just start over. And sometimes that's really hard because you've worked so hard and you've crafted that word and you thought about that one and you put that line break there, and then it just is all for naught, and you just have to start over from, like, what the heck was it that I was trying to get at in the beginning? And, like, how do you restart the heart of whatever it was that moved you to say something?
Seamus Heaney says the poem is done when you leave it alone and it leaves you alone. I believe in that. Last question.
What inspired you to start writing poetry?
What's that?
What inspired you to start writing poetry?
Music.
I'm
not answering questions.
That's why we're flat. That was weird. What? That question? Is that what I'm answering?
Yes.
Okay.
Any question you want.
Any question.
Yeah.
I think his question is harder, so I'm going to try to answer that.
Nice.
I would say that I try to, and I think maybe it's I don't know if it's the smartest way, but maybe the safest way to do it is once it's happening, just whatever's moving you, move with it, and let it just fall out, and don't toil over it at all. You know, just let it do what it's going to do if you're feeling that, and later retool it if necessary. But with songs, for me, sometimes it'll happen in 15 minutes and I won't touch it ever again, and sometimes it'll be 6 months of going back to it, like just like she said, just 'cause it just doesn't feel done or right. But overall, I think it's better, or at least it works better for me if I just let it fall out initially instead of trying to craft it too much. I mean, it's kind of a dangerous game.
So poetry and inspiration. I've been writing poetry since I could write, basically, or even like before I could write. I've just always done it. But I think maybe the primary motive was always like a desire to be heard. So I think, I don't know if that answers your question. It's like the impulse behind it in terms of topics, like things that move me, I guess, or strike me, inspire me to write. But I think the impulse is the desire to be heard.
Yeah, I mean, I used to fold construction paper in half, and like there would be epics about sharks inside, all sorts of things. So like I've always written and always loved to do that. And I had a great poetry teacher in college. And then of course stopped writing and got a job and had a real life. And the painfully honest answer is the reason I write is because it totally beats not writing. Because when I didn't write, I was pretty miserable and numb, and everything that looked good on paper was what was wrong with my life. And that's just why I was like, screw this, I'm a poet, and then moving to the city. Where's the U-Haul station? Let's go. So I do it to live because it helps me live, because it changes the way I engage with the world. It makes me wonder. The poems are usually smarter than me. I don't know why I wrote something I wrote until months later, and I'll be like, damn it, that was so smart. That came out of me, that's so sweet. So yeah, because it helps me live. And it's really hard it's not that it's not hard not to write. I mean, the day fills up and laundry has to get done and the cats didn't get fed and oh crap, I didn't do the thing that's due tomorrow. And so it's not hard to fill up a day so that you don't write, but it's hard to live if you don't write. Or at least that's true for me.
Right on. That's a good place to end. Way to come correct with the questions.
One more.
All right. There's one more question. We cannot live without this question. This is our homeboy. Jim Osborne will be performing this at the August Bonk. So you got to come up with a great question, otherwise they're not going to come and hear you.
My question is, do you ever do this in your poem?
I didn't hear the question. Could somebody repeat it, or could you repeat it?
Do you ever use the master to build your poem on?
I have it on the cell phone, I hear it wrong page. See, and it goes down, I have it on the shadow.
Sure. My favorite thing to steal from the masters is scansion. My favorite piece of music is by Robert Frost. When in Directive, where the speaker leads you, the audience, to this watering hole. He says, this is your watering place. Drink and be whole again beyond confusion. And I love the scansion of that, and I sometimes put that scansion at the top of whatever page I'm writing on, because I'm jealous of that music. I'm not jealous of a whole lot in this world, but like, that line is everything that I want to write. Drink and be whole again beyond confusion, because yes, I am always looking for that, both the music and the meaning, and the meaning is half the music, and the music is half the meaning, or both. You know, so I mean, that's, if I'm trying to steal anything from a master, it's how to live, it's instructions on how to live, and also how do I make that line? Like, I've put so many vowels and so many verbs and so many everything to try and make a line scan that way, and I've just never gotten anything to be near as good as Robert Frost did with that line.
I think for me, I have a sort of like a library in my head of things that I've read and like really thought about hard, either as a student or later on. And then those things may get sparked as I'm writing a poem. So some of the poems I read tonight had literary references in them, like the Little Lame Balloon Man Trolling for Dates was a reference to E. Cummings' poem Just Spring, where he has like these sweet little guys selling balloons. So I think that in some moments I'm in dialogue with those, but I don't necessarily sit down to write it like, oh, I'm going to write a poem, and that's like E. Cummings. I used to do that more than I do now, but I think I'm sometimes talking back and forth to those works that I've read.
I think you just nailed it. I feel the exact same. Seriously, that was good.
You gotta give somebody else's scrapbook, you gotta wait with it there.
All right, here are your instructions for the night. Way to come for academic questions, first of all. Other questions. So you have to look at the awesome artwork on the wall before you leave. Then you have to sign up on the email list if you're not on it. Then you have to buy a bunch of handmade jewelry and books. Thank you so much, our performers.